This video will provide helpful visual details to perform the R46 front suspension track bar frame bracket recall. Refer to the written recall for full details and follow all steps as instructed. Power wagon truck owners may have been inadvertently sent a recall notice. If the vehicle is a power wagon model, no inspection or repair is required. Return the vehicle to the customer. If the vehicle's front suspension has been modified with aftermarket suspension components, the recall cannot be completed. An original build configuration is required before this recall can be performed. The 3 transfer punches included in kit CBN-KR464AA are incorrect and they should be discarded. The replacement transfer punches in CBN-KR465AA kit are correct and should be used for all involved vehicle repairs. The correct punches have small transfer tips, whereas the incorrect punches have large transfer tips as shown. The first portion of the recall involves inspecting the welds on the front suspension track bar frame bracket. With the vehicle on an appropriate hoist, clean the track bar frame bracket area with brake cleaner or equivalent. Inspect all track bar frame bracket welds for cracks, fractures, and/or track bar bracket separation from the left frame rail. If there are no cracked welds, fractured welds, and/or bracket separation from the left frame rail, continue with Section B, front suspension track bar reinforcement bracket installation. If the front suspension track bar bracket is found to have cracked welds, fractured welds, and/or the bracket is separated from the frame, use the following procedure. Using a digital camera, photograph all of the welds of the track bar bracket and the surrounding area. If there is a suspect area, take additional close-up images from more than one angle to clearly show the issue. Also, if a crack is found in the front weld, an image from the rear of the bracket must be taken and submitted. Images should, at a minimum, mirror the 3 images shown in the recall in Section A. Review the images for clarity and focus before proceeding with the submission process. Have the vehicle information available, VIN, mileage, owner information, and then enter Dealer Connect to initiate a Service Technical Assistant Resource, or STAR case. Once the info has been properly submitted, FCA will review the case and determine which of the following actions will be required. Schedule a weld team to repair the welds. Schedule a weld team to replace the bracket. No action required, install reinforcement kit. Under no circumstances should a dealership attempt to weld cracked track bar bracket welds. Only an FCA-assigned weld team can make weld repairs to cracked track bar bracket welds. Caution: it is critical that these repair instructions are performed exactly as written. Do not perform steps out of order. The holes drilled in the frame will be out of location if these instructions are not followed as written, which will result in frame replacement or weld team support at the expense of the dealership. Carefully disconnect the vent hose at the front axle. Turn the front wheels to the full right turn position to gain additional clearance from the pitman arm. Remove the track bar bolt and flag nut from the track bar at the frame bracket, and then lower the track bar. Use the following procedure to modify the existing frame bracket. Begin by measuring and marking the frame bracket as shown. Carefully disconnect the brake tube from the 2 original plastic routing clips. Relocate the brake tube to gain clearance for the cutoff wheel. Using a cutoff wheel, cut the frame bracket along the lines made on the bracket. Using a small grinder, remove any burrs from the cut edge of the frame bracket. Using the original track bar bolt and flag nut, temporarily place the new reinforcement brackets onto the frame rail bracket. Tighten the original track bar finger tight. Caution: be sure to push the reinforcement brackets tight against the frame before snugging the track bar bolt. Using the supplied transfer punches, center punch the 2 hole locations shown using the new reinforcement brackets as a template. Caution: only punch and drill these holes at this time. If the sequence is not followed, the holes will be off and the frame will need to be replaced or weld team support at the expense of the dealership. Then carefully remove the reinforcement brackets. Using the supplied drill bit, drill a 1/8 inch diameter pilot hole at the 2 center punch marks made previously. Then use the supplied drill bits to enlarge the pilot holes to the following sizes: 3/16 inch, 7/16 inch, 17/32 inch. Use caution while drilling the 17/32 holes, to make sure that the desired size is not exceeded. If the holes are too large, the riv nuts may not fit correctly. Remove all burrs from the 2 holes drilled in the frame. Then apply 1 coat each of primer and top coat paint to the 2 hole openings drilled, along with the cuts made to the frame bracket. Allow the gray primer to flash prior to applying black top coat. Using a small hammer, tap a riv nut into each of the 17/32 inch diameter holes. Caution: make sure the riv nut shoulder is flush against the frame surface. Install the reinforcement brackets into the position, and then install the original track bar bolt finger tight. If a gap occurs between the front reinforcement and the riv nut, then install the M10 flat washer PN 061-06343AA. See Figure 12A in repair instructions. Create an installation tool from an M10-1.5 by 25 mm bolt PN 065-08295AA. Remove the blue thread locking compound from the bolt as shown. Install this bolt into one of the riv nut holes finger tight. Push the reinforcement up during the riv nut crimping process. It is important for the bracket to make contact with the head of the riv nut and the head of the riv nut to properly seat against the frame surface during the crimping process. Tighten the M10 installation bolt on the riv nut to 27 foot-pounds or 37 Newton meters to crimp the riv nut. Remove the M10 installation bolt and replace it with the M10 bolt that has the blue thread patch on it. Tighten this blue patch fastener finger tight. Repeat this process with the second riv nut on the rear reinforcement. If poor alignment occurs between the newly located M10 riv nut and the bracket hole, such that you cannot install the M10 installation bolt, perform the following procedure to modify either reinforcement for installation. Using a hand grinder with a burr wheel or small grinding wheel, relieve the reinforcement 2 to 3 millimeters in the direction of the misalignment. After removing the material, apply 1 coat each of primer and top coat paint to the bare metal. Allow the gray primer to flash prior to applying black top coat. Using the proper size transfer punch, center punch the remaining 4 holes, 3 on the frame and 1 on the reinforcement bracket. Then remove and save the reinforcement brackets. Using the supplied drill bit, drill a 1/8 inch diameter pilot hole at the center punch marks made previously for the 3 holes on the frame. Enlarge all 3 holes to 7/16 inch diameter, and then enlarge them to 17/32 inch. Enlarge the hole in the frame rail shown from 17/32 inch to 5/8 inch. Drill a 1/8 inch diameter pilot hole at the center punch mark made previously on the front reinforcement bracket. Then enlarge the hole to 7/16 inch diameter. Remove all burrs from remaining holes. Apply 1 coat each of primer and top coat paint to all hole openings drilled and any bare metal edges. Allow the gray primer to flash prior to applying black top coat. Using a small hammer, tap a riv nut into each of the 17/32 inch holes. Caution: make sure that the riv nut shoulder is flush against the frame surface. Screw the 14 mm nut onto the 14 mm bolt 2 or 3 times to clear any burrs from the bolt threads. Note: running the 14 mm nut up and down the bolt will make installing the bolt easier. Screw the 14 mm bolt into the bolt fish tape tool supplied with the kit. Using a piece of mechanics wire and starting at the 5/8 inch diameter frame hole, insert the mechanics wire and feed it through the frame until it comes out the existing hole on the outside face of the left frame rail. Connect the mechanics wire end to the bolt fish tape end at the outside face of the left frame rail. Carefully pull the mechanics wire out of the 5/8 inch hole until the bolt fish tape is pulled through the 5/8 inch frame hole. Disconnect the mechanics wire from the bolt fish tape end. Carefully pull the bolt fish tape until the 14 mm bolt is seated in the 5/8 inch frame hole. Remove and save the left side rubber jounce bumper. Thread the fish tape through the corresponding hole in the rear reinforcement bracket and place the bracket into position. Install the 1 M10 bolt with blue thread locking patch for the rear reinforcement bracket finger tight. Carefully remove the bolt fish tape tool from the 14 mm bolt and install the 14 mm nut finger tight. Place the front reinforcement bracket into position and install the original track bar bolt loosely. Push the reinforcement forward during the riv nut crimping process. It is important for the bracket to make contact with the head of the riv nut and the head of the riv nut to properly seat against the frame surface during the crimping process. Use the installation bolt to crimp the two riv nuts on the frame by tightening the bolt to 27 foot-pounds or 37 Newton meters. After crimping the riv nuts, remove installation bolt and install the M10 bolts with blue thread locking patch finger tight. Install M10 bolt with blue thread locking patch with flag nut finger tight. Place the track bar into position and install the track bar bolt. The bolt must enter from the rear of the vehicle and point forward with the track bar bolt nut on the front side. It may be necessary to pry the axle on the right side to allow the bolt to properly line up. Caution: if the track bar bolt is installed facing rearward, the suspension will hit the track bar bolt during suspension travel. Install the bolt through the rear reinforcement bracket first, with the nut going against the front reinforcement bracket. With full vehicle weight on the suspension, tighten the track bar bolt to 285 foot-pounds or 387 Newton meters. Apply 3 drops of thread locker to the 14 mm nut on the rear reinforcement bracket, and then tighten the nut to 110 foot-pounds or 150 Newton meters. Tighten all the remaining reinforcement bracket M10 cap screws to 27 foot-pounds or 37 Newton meters. Use the following procedure to install an additional brake tube routing clip. Measure and center punch the location shown. Drill a 1/8 inch diameter pilot hole at the center punch mark. Enlarge the 1/8 inch diameter hole to 1/4 inch diameter and then remove any burrs. Apply 1 coat each of primer and top coat paint to the edge of the 1/4 inch diameter hole. Allow the gray primer to flash prior to applying black top coat. Insert the brake tube routing clip barbed peg into the 1/4 inch diameter hole. Snap brake tube into the new brake tube routing clip. Snap the brake tube into the other 2 original brake tube routing clips. Adjust the brake tube as required to ensure that the brake tube is routed away from other components. Coat the jounce bumper frame cup and rubber jounce bumper with Mopar zipper lube or equivalent. Then install the left rubber jounce bumper into the receiver cup on the left frame rail. Install the axle vent hose to the axle vent hose fitting. With the bracket procedure complete, refer to the written recall for any additional instructions. If the steering wheel is off-center at the end of the procedure, use the drag link to adjust the orientation of the steering wheel. Do not use the tie rods to attempt to center the steering wheel.